So it's a great privilege to introduce Sally McManus to the FSU Congress. That's what my script says. No, pleasure to have you join us. Thank you. Sally made history when she became the first female secretary in the 90-year history of our great trade union movement's national peak body. She's daughter of a railway worker and a clerical officer and graduated with honours from Macquarie University. She joined the ACTU's trainee organiser program in 1994, and from there became an organiser of the Australian Services Union, focusing on workers in call centres in the IT sector. Call centre organiser as well, to my heart. Beautiful. In 2004, she became branch secretary of the ASU in New South Wales and ACT. And in 2015, Sally McManus moved to the ACTU as vice president, campaigns director, and was ultimately elected ACTU secretary 2 years later.
My name's Adrian. I'm with Commonwealth Bank. I work in a direct banking call centre with digital disputes, which is for people who've been scammed with online scams. I've been with the bank about 11 years. What I enjoy about my job is educating people who don't know a lot about online and giving them ways to empower themselves and stay safe in something that's a very volatile area of everyday life now. They've used loopholes since I have started working with them 11 years ago. The first thing was the only contract I got offered was an individual agreement, which should only be used in very special circumstances, but they were rolling it out carte blanche. They also employed me under a subsidiary that had a weaker enterprise agreement. So I started off on the wrong foot and then wasn't even told my other options. From there, they didn't keep up with checking to make sure that they were following their requirements in making sure that my pay stayed at par for what it should be, and they ended up ripping me off thousands of dollars in wage theft. That made my situation just day-to-day living harder. I didn't have as much money in my pocket, not enough money to pay bills, less money for securing stuff so that I could get a home loan, things like that. I have been able to get the money back, but only because the Finance Sector Union took the bank to task, and the Fair Work Commission took them to court, and they were found guilty of these practices and had to pay their workers back, but only within the statute of limitations. So there's still a bunch of money that the bank got away with because it was outside of what they could get back. I think closing these loopholes is so important because it is protecting workers' rights, protecting workers' pay, and making sure that we get a fair stick. Corporations are always going to look to minimise the amount of money that they pay, the same way they minimise the amount of money that they pay for taxes. We've got to make sure that we're getting as much as we can from the work that we produce. I think it's important to be a union member, not only because it's going to get you the best deal, but it's going to get all workers the best deal. The more of us that unionise, the higher we push everything for everyone, and the more impact you can have on the way the country works. I'm here today because of my union, and it's not just getting it right in the workplace, it's getting it right for all of Australia.
Some really important words there. But Adrian wasn't the first FSU member to go to Canberra. It won't be the last. It's not the first union member to do that. Last year, I got to meet Sally alongside other trade unionists from right across the movement. I represented the Finance Sector Union in lobbying efforts designed to lock in the Secure Jobs, Better Pay bill. Here are some photos from the delegation in action. So talking with members of Parliament about the issues facing workers, reminding them that we need real action on wages and secure jobs. I got to tell stories about the reasons why we needed action. Actions on better bargaining rights so we could win better wages, greater equality.
My name's Adrian. I'm with...
And the need to tackle insecure work. These are some of the photos here. Fantastic. We also presented the dollar coin, which is lots of fun. Our stories matter. They shape and debate and help in shifting policymaking areas where we needed reform. At the end of last year, Parliament voted to pass the crucial Secure Jobs, Better Pay bill. In the same week the bill was in the House, ANZ, which is my employer, confirmed that it would resume negotiations on their collective agreement. And when I say resume, I don't mean kickstarting something that had been recently dealt with. Our enterprise agreement expired over 7 years ago now. ANZ has over the years used every reason it can possibly to find reasons why they didn't want to or should not negotiate with the union on a new collective agreement. Right through to telling us that they'd spent millions and millions of dollars upgrading their HR software and couldn't possibly make any changes. Instead, they made unilateral pay adjustments to staff based off their own internal policy, and our conditions have withered away as they hadn't kept up with the rest of the sector. But when you have a government that's prepared to stand up for working people, we get new industrial relations laws that have reformed bargaining rights, making it easier and rebalancing power, and all of that changed in ANZ's approach to bargaining. Today, Morris, Tanya, Tanina, and I are sitting at the table on behalf of our ANZ workers. But that wasn't easy. It was a fight with ANZ to even have us reps attend bargaining. We had a situation where they had insisted that we could bargain remotely via Zoom. It was totally okay, it's totally fine within the process of bargaining, but they wouldn't dare enshrine the right to work from home on a daily basis. But that wasn't, back to the EA. It's a privilege to represent ANZ colleagues at the bargaining table, and I'm very passionate in ensuring our hard work is recognised and our bargaining outcomes reflect this. These laws are already making a difference for working people. Already at Congress, we've explored new positive duties and celebrated the end of pay secrecy. In this session, CBA reps Lisa Nedley and Adrian Theron we'll ask Sally about making these history-making reforms and what's coming up next for the trade union movement. Thank you.
Don't know why I need a microphone, but that's so that Sally can hear us. We do have a Mentimeter set up for this, and given our track record with technology at the moment, I'm not sure if that's going to work. So cross our fingers, everybody. So Sally, I'm just going to get straight into the tough questions, and I just want to thank you again for joining us here today. I'm sorry you couldn't do it in person. It was lovely to spend time with you up in Canberra just last week. Chris has mentioned that yesterday, that's not a word. Yesterday, we celebrated our union wins, but also reflected on what it means to be a strong union. And I see so many passionate people in this room today, and it's amazing. It makes me feel very warm inside. For us, that means there is strength in numbers. We have more workers joining with us in the fight to secure good industrial incomes. That too. We look at headwinds we are facing across the financial sector and the impact of digitization, and we had a session about that this morning. It was very, very scary for a lot of people. Access to work is hard, so we struggle to get access to our comrades and our colleagues to engage in our union activities, but also organisations have that same issue with laws put up by our organisations and our bosses. Even with the improved IR laws, there's many challenges ahead of us. So as a movement and a union, we achieve so many great things for working people, but not everyone joins the union. So my question to you, Sally, is the biggest challenge facing our what is the biggest challenge facing our union movement, and what do you think we should do to seize the opportunity before us with new laws to keep growing our union?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. First of all, I'm really sorry I couldn't be there. It's just crappy Melbourne weather and dangerous driving, and especially not that I would want to enable anyone whatsoever to spend some time with you and have a few drinks. Anyway, I also wanted to thank Chris, Adrian and Lisa for coming to Canberra and being part of the lobbying exercise just last week. It made a really big difference, and also all of the delegates that came last year as well. In terms of that hard question you asked, what's our biggest challenge? On one hand, it's easy to answer because the biggest challenge is growing our union movement. That is easily our biggest challenge, and no laws that we get in are going to automatically cause that to happen unless we have a law that all of a sudden says everyone has to be a member of their union. And I sort of can't quite see us manage to get that through the Senate at the moment. So I think that there's no question that's our biggest challenge, and it has been our biggest challenge for 30 years. It's not something that's just this year been our challenge, and a lot of you who've been around for a while totally know that, right? But we've got to not get into a mindset of being on the back foot all the time. And I'd imagine being in your industry with all the changes that have happened over a long period of time, that can be sort of a natural thing too, because your employers have gone about doing a whole lot of changes over a period of time that's really made life difficult, and you're always fighting from the back foot in a way, like defending to stop bad stuff happening. I think that there's got to be a mindset change for all of us that a couple of things. First of all, we've just won all these new rights. Now, rights in themselves don't bring about change. We bring about change. And the best way of thinking about it is that all of a sudden, as union delegates, you're equipped with a whole brand new toolbox that's got a whole lot of extra and effective, hopefully, tools in there in order to deliver for our members, but also to grow the union. And some of the things that we want to achieve in the next lot of changes are going to really add to that as well. Because we all know that people join unions because they see us as being effective about a means of achieving what they want to achieve. And if we can think about very carefully, like, how do we use these new laws to demonstrate the necessity of being a union member and the value of sticking together? So hopefully the bargaining laws help with that. Like the fact that ANZ is now bargaining, it sends a signal about these matters. But all of those other rights about pay secrecy, obviously about sexual harassment and about equal pay, and a whole lot of the other ones, it means that our ability to be able to more effectively and easily do things about bad stuff that bosses do has increased significantly. So when we change our mindset, we start thinking about, okay, how can we take rights forward, and how can we go about changing things, knowing that we've actually got some tools that are going to help us do that now. So I think that they're really, really important things for us to think about in terms of how we go about that work of growing our union movement.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to chuck in another quick question because I can, and I will. So we've had a lot of discussion, and we've got some great reps in this room and delegates as well. And we've been having discussions about how do you ask a worker to join, and what's the most effective way to do that. So can you give us your most effective pitch line for getting workers to join the union?
Okay. So let's pretend that the issue in your workplace is bullying. Let's just pretend that for the sake of it, okay?
Sure.
So now you're going to make it do a role play. I know it's sort of weird, and especially
I love role playing. Let's do this.
Okay. So listen, we're not going to. We all know that we need to do something about Sue, the manager, our manager, who's a bully, and that we're not going to be able to achieve this by ourselves. We're just not going to be able to. But we could achieve it if we all agreed that we were going to stick together and we were going to approach this together. And that way, if we approach it together and as a united group, it's going to be pretty hard for HR to ignore us on this matter, and also really hard for Sue to pick any one of us off. And the way to do that is, first of all, for us all to be union members. That's our commitment to each other. And then when we make decisions together, and we go forward together, and we stick together to make the change we need to change. It's just going to make us much, much stronger in our negotiations, because they might be able to dismiss just me and my views, but they won't be able to dismiss all of their views. And I just think that that's the way we are going to make positive change in our workplace. Are you with us? Would you like to join?
Look, Sally, thank you. If I heard that pitch, I'd be going, yeah, because Sally's got that. So, look, Sally, I'm going to hand over to Adrian. I'll be back to ask you some more hard-hitting questions in a little bit.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Sally, for joining us. It's so exciting to be up here with you, even if it is virtually. Chris spoke earlier about his trip to Canberra. Lisa, Steve Howland and I went to, and I have just come back from a big lobbying effort last week. We played you a short video earlier of me. I hope I didn't look too funny. That was produced to help with the Canberra for closing those loopholes reforms. We covered a range of issues from sham contracting, same job, same pay, delegates' rights, and wage theft. Recently, CBA conceded that it has knowingly participated in wage theft. Sam shared the wage theft story with you yesterday. Senior bank staff were a part of this collusion, and it was systematic over an extended period of time. They said that HR knew about the wage theft and did nothing about it. No one at CBA has been held to account for this, and they're still working there. Sally, a question for you. Is this kind of egregious behaviour by corporate Australia that should lead to criminal sanctions?
I think that where there's deliberate, either deliberate inaction or deliberate action to enable or to facilitate wage theft, then yes, I do think that people should face criminal sanctions. I would say that I think as a union movement, we've got to be a little bit careful though about the criminal sanction side of things. This is something we don't talk about too much, but I always worry that once you start putting criminal sanctions in our laws, I don't know whether who's the first person who's going to go to jail. Is it going to be the CEO of Commonwealth Bank, or will it be a union official or a union leader? I put it on a union official or a union leader. So we've got to be really clear about making it equivalent to, stealing and theft, and because it actually is, and making sure that we make a difference between places that will make mistakes and ones that do it deliberately. Now, your ability to argue that you made a mistake diminishes a fair bit the bigger you are, and there's no one bigger than the banks in Australia, or for that matter BHP, who's just been caught doing this as well. They've sort of got no excuse because they've got all of the means available. In the case of your place, if those managers knew in the back of their head that they could be held personally responsible in a way that would lead to criminal sanctions, well, you would find that they'd be carving out a whole lot of their day to make sure that this never happens. So I do think that side of it's important, but I just also, temper that a bit by saying we need to be a bit careful that we don't set precedents that then get turned against us when a bad government gets in power, which eventually sometime down the track will be the case. The other part of it is the reason why they do it too is they do a cost benefit about whether they'll be caught. If they are caught, not just the sanctions on themselves, but using lawyers just to make it so bloody hard to get the money back. So when I talked about the toolbox of union delegates or union delegates, if we can also have in our toolbox the ability of unions to represent union members and get that money back quickly and easily rather than having to slug it out with the company's lawyers, that will make a big difference too, and also be a really clear distinction between being a union member and not being a union member.
Thanks. Do you think bosses will campaign against the kind of reforms we're seeking in Tranche 3?
Well, they've already started. I don't know. Has anyone seen their stupid ads? There's these ads that the Minerals Council are funding, where they've got the logos of all the employer organisations, but we know the money's only coming from the big miners, and they're ridiculous. They've got the one I've seen, but there's 3 of them. It's got it's at like a nursery, and they've got 2 workers, and they say, "Oh, these laws are really bad because it means that this inexperienced, person who's only just started and been there for 6 months is going to get paid the same as someone who's been there for 20 years," as if union movement or a Labor government would ever propose laws that meant that people who are experienced wouldn't get paid more. Like, it's so crazy. And I just think that we knew that there was going to be a big campaign coming, and I also wouldn't assume that they don't have some other ad campaign coming that's better than this one. But this one's like lies. It's like straight out lies. And why do people lie? They lie because telling the truth isn't a very good argument. And so I reckon what they did is they got all of these focus groups together, like they paid a big ad company. Please try and find out how we can convince workers that a policy about same job, same pay, which is about stopping employers outsourcing to labour hire to avoid their EBA obligations, like to cut pay, like same job, less pay. please find out a way that we can sell to workers that it's a bad idea. And I reckon they've tested all these different lines. And the one line that people agreed with is, yes, people with different skills and experience, deserve to be paid, more, not the same. And so they've just made an ad about that, which has got nothing to do with the actual issue. But I think that if all of you are going to see a really ferocious campaign, even with this misstart on their side of it, those big miners, and the reason why they're doing this is a bit like your employers. They've just got so much money, and the mining companies have just got, them and Qantas have just got, they're like triple black belts in how to game the system. And I know your employers do too, but in particular these ones, triple black belts in what schemes they can put in place to cut wages and conditions. Qantas has got 21 labour hire companies, most of them owned by Qantas. For their flight attendants alone, they've got 12 companies that they employ flight attendants from, and they own most of those companies, all on different wages and conditions. And what they do is they say to the flight attendants union, accept this pay cut. If you're not going to accept it, that's fine. We're just going to give the work to the labour hire company who's already on half the wages of the permanent employees. So the reason why they're going to be really ferocious in this campaign is because they can add up how much it's going to cost them, and because they've worked out their business models around, all these loopholes. So it's going to be a ferocious campaign. They'll probably add up, how much they could spend on advertising and how much they'll save if they can get Labor to blink. So all of us have got to be ready to fight, especially over the next, I'd say, 6 weeks.
Thank you. What can we do to support them in passing this through Parliament?
I think that the next 6 weeks we just need to keep Labor really strong. So any of you who live in a federal Labor electorate should contact your Labor MP and say that you fully support what they're doing around these laws. Just call them the same job, same pay laws, even though it's got wage theft and everything else in there. That you fully support them. They need to make these changes to address the cost of living issue. You shouldn't underestimate how important that is. Like, it just makes them stronger when they know. It's the same as all the work that your union's been doing with the delegations to Canberra. That makes a big difference. Share stuff on social media around it, like to your friends and family, obviously, as well. Then hopefully these laws around sort of maybe August might get into Parliament. At that point, we're really going to have to focus on the Senate and getting it through the Senate. And that means we need the Greens to vote for it. And then we need one more vote. That one more vote can only come from David Pocock. So anyone in the ACT is critically important. From Jackie Lambie and Tammy Tyrrell, who are in Tassie. So anyone in Tassie, very important. Or from, Pauline Hanson and that in Queensland, who will be hard. And there's another bloke called Ralph Babbitt, who's just like very difficult in Victoria. So the main sort of chances of getting that extra vote, if we can get the Greens, will be David Pocock and Tammy and Jackie Lambie. So that's where, ACTU, me and Michelle will do our thing, and your leaders will do their thing. But them hearing directly from you and people who vote for them or are in their electorates or think they might vote for them is like worth sort of so many more. So I would ask you to put aside some time there to help us out.
Thank you. And what are the biggest opportunities that we have with new IR laws?
Okay, so anyone sees any wood around you, touch wood, because I feel a bit superstitious at this point talking about what might happen if it hasn't happened yet. But if everything goes well, we'll get new laws about wage theft. So as we talked about, it will make it much, much easier for you as union delegates to stop it and stop it before it ever gets to a position of where it's been with that amount of money being stolen. Also, the other really big things in there are all to do with job security. So huge issue, obviously, for you around casualisation, around contracting out, around same job, same pay for labour hire. And the other thing we are really pushing for is better delegates' rights. hasn't been talked about a lot. I think that, soon the employers will focus on that matter, but stronger delegates' rights to protect you and your jobs is something we also want to achieve. So they will provide a lot of opportunities.
Thank you. I'm going to quickly hand it back to Lisa for a bit.
All right, now I'm going to hand it back over to the room to ask Sally the hard questions. I think we've done our bit. There is actually some more to come from me later, and I know some more from Adrian, but just want to hand it out to the room. Like I said, we were going to have a mentee up on the screen, but with our technical difficulties, I think this might be easier. So just going to take one or two questions from the room. Is there anyone that has a question that they would like to ask Sally while we have her undivided attention on the screen? Wendy's going to try and work the technology.
They just said don't.
Nailed it.
Hi, Sally. I'm Gabby. I work at Host Plus. I have two questions. One, if we don't have significant criminal penalties, what incentive is there for a bank that makes $7 billion in profit not to commit wage theft again?
Well, I do agree that there does need to be criminal penalties. I just was raising sort of us being careful about how we use this so it doesn't get turned against us. So I do agree with that. The other part of the thing we should be just a little bit mindful of, if your bosses think that they're going to go to jail, they are going to make it as hard as they're going to deny everything. Like everything will be denied, and they'll fight it all the way, which includes not make it harder and harder and harder to get that money, and it'll be sort of all or nothing. And so we've got to also make sure that we absolutely deliver on easy ways for people to get the money back, and then fines as well, because once you get into criminal law, it does mean that, they're going to, if they admit it, they go to jail, so they may as well fight it, right? So if that means people have to wait 5 years to get their wages back, like we never want that either. So I think the spectre of the possibility of them facing this is important, but not everything.
Thanks, Sally. And my other question was, sorry, being cheeky, taking two, but
That's all right, I'll give you this.
flexible work applications from yesterday can be reviewed and appealed through Fair Work. How effective do you think this will be in getting workers the flexibility they need to be able to work more and in a way that suits them?
Well, the reason why we've got that law is because as a movement we asked for it, and the reason is because the previous law allowed employers just to say, well, they don't think operational reasons, or they probably can't, so they didn't have to have a very good reason. Or any reason really, and because no one could review it. So this will force different decision-making within organisations. If they know that whatever their decision-making is going to be scrutinised, and they're going to have to justify it to an external body who's also a public external body, like these aren't held in secret, these cases, they're more likely to come to better decisions without having to go to the Fair Work Commission. So I think there's some technical term for it, like the shadow of a court being able to do something often forces better decisions in the workplace. So this goes to one of the tools that I'm talking about. Like if you're a workplace delegate and you're trying to negotiate this for one of your fellow union members, you're trying to assist them with it, and the boss knows in the end if they say no, it's all up to them, whether they're nice or not, that's one thing. If they know that if they don't agree with you, they're going to end up before the Fair Work Commission, that's another thing, right? So all of a sudden your bargaining power as a workplace delegate has completely changed. So, your answer of like how much difference will this make in the end? Well, of course, proof will be in the pudding and where we get to what happens. And I think there'll be different outcomes at different places, but no doubt the number of flexible work requests that people make will be approved in massive, bigger number than they have been so far.
Thanks for that, Gabby. I was just going to say, maybe we need CBA employees to go to Fair Work and ask for that change after the mandate to return to the office without negotiation. Just say.
Hi, Sally. This is Adam. I work at Bankwest. I was really quite saddened this morning to see a news article, and don't always take Channel 7's news being gospel, but for Channel 7 or the Liberals to actually have a bashing against ACTU today around increasing wages equals increase in RBA rates. I'm just wondering, and how do we actually address that fake news?
Yeah, so we were pretty pissed off this morning about all of that. The employers in Australia are really hurting around changes we got in last year, and the fact that we won a good increase before the Fair Work Commission for 20% of the workforce on Friday, right? And that all of those fights are pretty willing. And I managed to get on Channel 7 late on Friday afternoon and get on live TV to say that this increase is brought to you by the Trade Union Movement of Australia. And you can only get away with that now and again because it's like free advertising, right? So in a way, that would have just infuriated them all. And I'm sure what happened is a whole lot of the people who put in, members of the employer organisations also advertise on Channel 7. I'm sure they would have been all on saying, you need to give the other side of this now. And the thing is that those employers, so your employers, big banks, the big supermarkets and the big energy companies, all the ones that are fighting the rights we're trying to get, are the ones that are delivering the big profits at the moment, right? So it's in their interest to be blaming workers, or in this case, much better to blame the ACTU than your average worker, to try and get people to turn against the union movement for fighting for low wage workers. So I think the best way of countering it is to say it's companies that decide to put up prices, and they're all delivering big profits at the moment. They could drop prices if they wanted to, but they're not. And that it's not low-paid workers. Like, they're the ones who have been, well, all the evidence, you can go into all the evidence, but in the end, like a whole lot of people who, and the evidence is that every year, so last year was a 5% increase to award wages, and it made like 0.07% difference to the overall wage increase, so hardly anything, and it had no impact on inflation, like zero. And over the last 20 years, the minimum wage increases had no impact on inflation. So straight out on the facts, not true, but it's effective to point to the profits that have been delivered and how unfair it is that low-paid people and the working people and their representatives have been blamed for a problem they didn't create.
So I'm going to hand back to Adrian, and I'm sure he's got a few more questions for you. And I'll get to have a chat to you.
Thanks. Sally, recently you had an interview on ABC with Michael Rowland. In that interview, you talked about the role that corporate profits are playing in driving up wages. Lisa and I, along with Sam and Damien out there, are at the table with CBA right now. Others here are negotiating to pay ANZ, NAB, RBA, ART, and Australian Super. And later this year, we kick off negotiations with IAG Insurance. Big banks are tipped to make more than $30 billion in profit this year. Last year, our CEO, Matt Common's pay went up by 35% to almost $7 million. Terrible. While he was arguing that a higher wage growth could lead to a wage price spiral. It's a little hypocritical of our CEO to say that wages are the cause of inflation when he took home $7 million, and it's likely that they'll put a pay offer on the table that will see us go backwards in real terms. What advice do you have for CBA members and the rest of us here today negotiating pay, and any tips for how we can win better wages?
Well, I would just say that the most important thing is the same most important thing. Is what happens in the negotiating room, but in a way, sometimes the most important thing is what happens outside of the negotiating room in terms of organising activities. and about how strong you can build the unity amongst, your workforce. And so in a way, like with the cost of living pressures that all of your members are under and the profits that have been delivered by those companies and what the CEOs are paying themselves, it's never a better time for a pay rise and never a fairer time for a pay rise. So I'm sure you are doing it, but illustrating all of those just stark inequities, that all of that unfairness, and then just putting every effort into sort of systematic organising to be able to, build maximum unity around whatever your pay, demand is. I know that doesn't sound like anything new or rocket science, but it's the only thing that works.
Thank you. And let's see, were you happy with the Fair Work Commission decision from last Friday on minimum wage increase?
Look, you're always mindful that it's less than what CPI is, but then again, CPI is projected to fall to 4% by, this time next year. So if that's the case, this pay rise is a very good pay increase. And I think overall, I would say, yes, we are very happy with it. We think it's sustainable and fair. We were always had in the back of our minds that we were going to be attacked massively. Like, of course, those same employers attack us anyway, but if they think they can blame us for like inflation, it's Christmas for them. And they get to divert from their role in all of this. But it's going to make a significant difference. Like, you all know how hard it is to get pay increases, and that pay increase for those workers, and some of them I'd imagine would be yours, will make a big difference.
Thanks. And how does an increase like that to minimum and award wages help those of us on enterprise agreements?
I suppose it lifts the floor. So all your award wages go up by that amount. So that lifts where that is. And so it would mean too that the banks, if they're competing with, or they've got within their industry people that are on awards and that they're all moving up, that should put some extra pressure on them in terms of wanting to maintain that differential between how much they pay above like the bottom. So inevitably that will feed into the thinking around this. But, no, Australians aren't happy with your employers at the moment either. So they're going to be totally on the side of, finance sector workers who are fighting them for a fair pay rise at this time.